What are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz
It's us.
us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it. The fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Welcome to Closing Gap Podcast. It's Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbur Hamilton. And we are here once again this week on WATV V94.9 on your FM dial. You can also find us at YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth, and also on any of your streaming places where you stream podcasts. You can look us up at Closing the Gap, The Truth. And we are appreciative for another day.
Yes, sir.
And man, that God has allowed us to be alive, and we are grateful and glad about it. And so today we want to talk about the mistakes that we make when we get hasty.
Yes, sir.
All right? When we rush to make judgments, or, that when that happens, we oftentimes don't get done what we need to get done.
Mm-hmm.
We end up putting ourselves in some bad predicaments, bad positions, financially bad predicaments, bad positions in our personal lives. And so that's why we've been encouraging everyone to put a plan together. Now, here it is. We are in the middle of March. We're still talking about planning, because when you have a plan, you can always pivot and make something different happen if the plan fails. Or if you see something else outside of your control happening, when you have a plan, you can make the necessary adjustments to your plan. But if you don't have a plan, guess what? You've planned to fail. And so we want everybody to succeed, because that's what God desires. God desires us to succeed. God desires for us to prosper, and above all, to have good health. And so also in the scripture, it says that Proverbs 21:5 out of New Living Translation, it says that good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty.
Well, that's a word.
That is a word. That is a word. And as Mr. Hamilton and I are talking about this show this week, is that we are encouraging you all to do these things, but we're also holding ourselves accountable and holding each other accountable in this way, right? In our own conversations and plannings for the show, and plannings for our lives, and plannings for the business. Wilbur, I know I'm make a quick pivot right here. I was talking to another barber on the other week, and we were talking about our business and things that we have to do. And man, he hit me with some things that made me rethink my business, right? And where I had to realize, okay, I need to make some adjustments to my own plan. There are some things that I could be doing better, or that I could be doing, period, that I'm not doing, and have not done them, basically because I have been analyzing too much and been paralyzed. But then also in the midst of that, I found, as I thought about it, I thought that sometimes I want to make a decision, but then I want to rush the decision, but then I don't want to make a hasty decision. And so I said, hey, look, you've been talking all this talk on the podcast about making a plan. So you need to go back, revisit your original plan, make the necessary adjustments so you can grow. And then, so when you have that plan, you can make the adjustments. So yes, today, let's talk to the people, and I'll ask you this question to begin, that from your perspective, now that you have a plan, that you built a plan, what should we do next?
Well, I think, having a plan and you looking at next steps, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head just a second ago. You've done the evaluation, and now it's time for the implementation. And that's where sometimes people get hung up. If you've done the plan, you've been doing some evaluation along the way, but you want to make sure that evaluation is done. But like I said, the implementation, it takes a little bit of trust, a little bit of faith. And they're stepping out on faith to make sure, and just trusting God that, he's going to do what he's going to do, as long as we doing what we're supposed to do. So that's where the implementation comes at, in the process of making sure, because without the implementation, the plan will be null and void. I mean, God has given us the vision. We wrote it down. We've made it plain. But if we don't implement it, it would never come to pass. So, we have to, like I say, take action. The big thing is we have to take action if we want to evoke change and create change in our lives and the lives of the people around us so we can all be, more successful. So, and that's especially, true, of course, when it comes to financial planning. There's no way to improve your performance on a monetary basis without actually making changes, without actually cutting the cost, without actually, canceling that extra direct TV service, without actually canceling that extra iPad that you don't need, without actually canceling, some of that miscellaneous spending that you're doing with Uber Eats and DoorDash. So, we can look at the bill and we can analyze it and see that, this bill is too high. But at some point in time, we got to make a conscious decision for lunch on that Tuesday and Thursday. You know what? I'm going to take my lunch with me instead of ordering it when I get to the office and paying that extra 20-30% markup because of that delivery fee and that processing fee that Uber Eats and DoorDash is getting. So, we got to make the implementation so we can actually see the tangible results. So we can feel that money go back into, our pockets. So we can actually see the evaluation and the implementation affect our bottom line in our retirement accounts, in our savings accounts, and investment opportunities.
So evaluation and implementation. So as I evaluate my eating habits sometimes, so my wife and I have conversation, and sometimes she didn't really like when I said it, but she started to get what I was saying is that I told her, I said, look, sometimes, baby, I'm at the barbershop, and because we have certain things going on with the kids, I'm like, I'm satisfied with eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I like peanut butter and jelly too. Don't get me wrong. But also, it's a cheaper lunch for me for that day. And because, like you said, I'm evaluating what I have going on in the household for the month or for the week, right? And maybe I had to get some car repairs or something like that came all of a sudden. And I had to use some of my emergency fund to take care of those things. Now, I had to replenish that fund. So I'm comfortable personally with, hey, okay, today I'm going to eat light, or I'm not going to buy certain things, like you said. And I don't do much DoorDash, but I think you're talking to yourself on that one. Like you always say, right? Talking to myself with making those orders. But yeah, making proper evaluation of what you're doing, and then after you take that analysis, now implementing it. And that's always the hard thing is that, yeah, I see what I'm doing, but now I have to put the action in. Yes, right. I have to put the action in. So after I evaluate financially what I'm doing, then implementing it, because even before with you and I and me, evaluating my financial situation, and I think it took us a few meetings before I actually implemented the plan that you had laid out for me, right? And so that comes down to a third word of execution. So what does it take? What would you tell the people to encourage them to implement and execute a financial plan?
Well, it's several key factors that you have to have, and they need to be looked at and assessed when you're evaluating, implementing, and that leads to that proper execution. Because we don't want to just execute; we want to execute properly. And they say, prior planning prevents poor performance. So we want to make sure that we evaluating the right things, so we can get the right execution. But that would always tell us, say, look here, just because you're working don't mean you're being productive. You can be busy doing nothing and going nowhere. So you can run standing in place. So we want to make sure we're going somewhere. So we got to make sure we're evaluating the right things. And within the financial plan, there's, 3 factors that you got to always be taking a look at when you're doing your evaluation before you do the implementation to get to right execution. You got to understand, what is your risk assessment? What is your time horizon? And how much liquidity do you need? These things all go together when you're putting together the financial plan and you're doing the evaluation, because those are things that tell you where you should go and how you should get there and approximately when you're going to arrive. So you have to evaluate all 3 in conjunction, not separate.
Okay.
You do all of them at the same time. All of these 3 areas need to be assessed, because that's what prevents improper execution. You know, I meet people all the time and they tell me, oh, man, Mr. Hamilton, the stock market is bad. Or somebody say, well, you know, annuities are bad. Or somebody say, well, life insurance is bad. Term is bad. Whole life is bad. And the truth is be told is none of those things are bad. Anything not put in its proper context and not utilized the right way can be bad. I tell you all the time, you know, too much water can kill you.
Yeah.
But water ain't bad for you.
Right.
You know, air going into the wrong places in your body can kill you. But we all need oxygen to survive.
Yeah.
So, you know, too much of anything can be a bad thing. So that's why there's an evaluation that needs to happen so you can do proper implementation and get the right kind of execution.
Good. Okay, so we need risk assessment, time horizon, and liquidity. So the risk assessment, basically looking at your tolerance level, right?
Correct.
When I go to the doctor, sometimes the doctor asks, okay, what's your pain level today?
Correct.
Right? Like how are you feeling today? And you have to rank that with a number so that the doctor will know how to address your issue.
Correct.
Right? Or like when I was used to play golf, I had injured my shoulder, bad swing, improper. You know what I'm saying? I'm out there, I'm active, but I'm active in the wrong way. And as I would go in and rehab, and the doctor would always assess our progress, right? By understanding my tolerance for pain, tolerance for range of motion in there. And so we have to do those same things when it comes to financial plane, understanding that. So let's talk about the time horizon. How would you frame that for the people today? What is it?
Your time horizon is really, you know, what do you need the money for? So understanding when is this money going to be utilized? Because your time horizon will dictate how the money should be invested and also what it should be invested in. So with the time horizon, we're going to look and say, okay, well, if I'm looking to buy a house in 5 years, well, I know that based on my time frame, I may need to be a little bit more conservative because I need that money to be here. I can't afford to, you know, maybe take a loss because this is something I need to have. A roof over my head is very important, especially if I'm trying to get out of an apartment. I'm trying to make a transition because I have my financial plan in place. And this is my next step in building that generational wealth for my family is me purchasing a home. Well, I don't need to be overly aggressive with those funds during that time period because if I lose too much at the wrong point in time, there is no coming back. So a lot of advisors will tell you, oh, don't worry about the stock market. If you lose it, it's going to come back. Well, that is just true, but only if you have enough time for that money to come back. See, time is the biggest factor in making money. Right. It's not always how much money you have, it's how much time you have before you actually need to utilize those funds. So if I have a much longer period of time, if I'm saying me being 42 years of age, and I'm planning for retirement, and I plan on retiring, they say, at 65 years of age. Well, now I got a little bit of runway there. You know, I got 20 plus years until that time comes. So now I can be a little bit more aggressive with my investment philosophy because if I do lose a little in a downturn like we're having right now and a pullback in a correction, well, I have time to recover and then, of course, still be able to move ahead and offset that with performance over the years to come. Well, if we're talking about, like I said, you know, you have a daughter getting ready to go to college or a daughter in college and you're planning for another one that's going to get closer to college. And you saying, well, you know what, Mr. Hamilton, I got, you know, $15,000 I need to invest and put away for college. Well, college is here. We can't take no chances with this money that we're planning for college. So whatever we do, it needs to be conserved. So when you're looking at your time horizon, that's going to help you evaluate what kind of opportunities you need to be in order to get the right kind of returns and results. So that's why understanding your time horizon is important. That's why understanding your risk assessment is also important because those things go hand in hand.
Okay. So hand in hand, time horizon. I'm looking at where I am, what I have going on, which also will apply to how much risk I can take.
Absolutely.
And I think you just said that as well and explained my situation to perfection because I have a daughter in college. I have a daughter that's graduating this year, about to go to college, and then right behind her, I have another daughter that will be coming up on her 10th grade sophomore year. And so my time horizon is in the now, right now. And so everything that I do, I can't be as risky at this stage.
Correct.
And so let's talk a little bit about that risk assessment then. How how do we evaluate our risk assessor? How do we do a proper risk assessment?
Well, the biggest thing is, the first thing I do is know yourself.
Okay.
The biggest detriment to most people's financial success is usually them. It's your risk tolerance, and that's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a thing called time value of money.
Okay.
And there's a thing of missing out on returns because you're not aggressive enough. And then there's a thing of being way too aggressive, because you don't understand your situation. So having a risk assessment, and that's basically us asking a series of questions so we can get a better idea of how would you feel if the stock market was going through a correction right now. So I have people that are coming to my office and say, Mr. Hamilton, I'm extremely aggressive with my investing. I want to be as aggressive as possible. And then we ask them a few questions. I say, well, if you lost more than 10%, how would you feel? Man, I need to get out of that. I don't need to do that. I don't want to lose no money. Well, you just told me you want to be extremely aggressive. But then on the flip side, you tell them you don't want to lose any money. Well, guess what? Those two things don't go together. We can't have our cake and eat it too. Yeah. We got to take the good with the bad. It's a double-edged sword. So we have to understand that if I want to make a lot, I'm going to have to understand I'm going to have to be willing to risk a certain amount as well. Now, if I'm comfortable making a little bit less, well, guess what has happened? That's going to put me in a situation where I'm taking on less risk as well. So, understanding what you're comfortable with. And I tell people all the time, that's going to change over time. The more you invest, the more comfortable you're going to become when you have a better understanding of how the markets work. That doesn't mean you're going to know what's going to happen before it happens. But it means is, you're going to be comfortable because there's going to be ebbs and flows in the market. The market is going to go up and sometimes it's going to come down. And we don't have control over exactly when it's going to come down and when it's going to go up. But what we can control is how much we make when it's going up and how much we lose when it's going down based on how we actually are invested from a risk perspective. So we have to find out, what is our own individual sweet spot, not going off of somebody else's. So all too often I ask people, how did you decide on your investments inside of your 401k, your TSP, or any of those accounts? And they'll say, well, I was talking to my coworker and this is what they did and this is what made them money. I'm like, but your coworker is a totally different human being than you. They have a totally different situation than you. So why are you invested exactly like somebody else who doesn't know if you're married or not, if you have kids or not, if you have to take care of a mother or father or not? They don't know anything about your roles and responsibilities in your house financially. But you just made a determination on your financial future and your retirement success by having water cooler talk. And we see it all too often. I meet with people all the time on their jobs and ask them, why did you get involved in this? Well, my coworker, they was doing this, so this is what they said I should do. I'm like, is your coworker a licensed financial advisor? Well, no. Well, how did you make? Well, my son, he took finance in high school. He took finance in class in college, and and he said, and I talked to him. I said, well, is he licensed and certified? Does he do this for a living? But you're taking your advice from someone who is not directly tied to your situation, that is not going to be responsible for the financial success or lack thereof when something goes wrong. So make sure you get the right help from the right people because they can help you avoid some of those pitfalls when it comes to being far too aggressive. We're seeing a lot of that right now. Yeah. A lot of people are up in arms. I'm talking to people on a daily basis because of what's going on in the market right now and how it's affected their 401k in a short period of time. And like, Mr. Hamilton, I'm losing too much money. Well, my first question is, how much could you afford to lose before you started doing what you was doing? Well, I ain't think about that. Well, that's your problem right there. I can tell you did not have the right conversation because you didn't know how much you could afford to lose. So how did you even know you should be putting it at risk? We have to know where we are to figure out the best way to get where we're trying to go. This is why every day I get in my car, I know the way to get to my office almost blindfolded because I've been going that same direction for years now. But every time I leave the house, I still put the address in my GPS just to make sure, is this going to be the best way for me to go today? Because it may be an accident. It may be, something, it may be doing some road construction and I may need to take an alternative route to get there. It may say, we can go the same route, but it may take you 15 minutes longer If you take an alternative route, you may get there 5 minutes faster. And now I can make the right decision to make an adjustment like we talked about before because I got a plan. And those plans have been laid out before me, and now I can make a conscious decision to continue on having success, not just some of the time, but all of the time. We'll be right back in a minute.
Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and the owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. So, Wilbert, you're just talking about that, time horizon and risk assessment and understanding it. So, with the story that you were just giving about the person's coming in and saying that, okay, I'm losing too much money, and then you had a conversation with them about, did you understand how much money you could lose and how? What comes to mind to me is that doing a risk assessment, how often should we do a risk assessment then?
Well, the risk assessment, I would say, should be done at minimum once a year.
Okay.
And the reason why I say this is because life changes and it changes fast nowadays. And that doesn't mean that, a change is going to happen every year. We just want to assess things because, like you said, you have one daughter in college, one daughter getting ready to go to college, and another one pulling up right behind those. So as you get older, your risk tolerance is going to change because your circumstances is going to change. So as those daughters get out of college, and now the focus is just you and just your wife. Now you can say, I have a different goal and objective. I have some of those things off of my plate now. So now I can take a different course of action because I'm looking to accomplish a different goal and I need a different kind of result. So that's why we want to do those assessments, on an annual basis. And it's not necessarily saying that you've changed in the course of that year, but things change in the course of that year. And we just want to make sure that we're staying up to date. And luckily, if we have a plan, we've kind of identified some of those benchmarks as we go along. We've talked about those things. The daughter's going to college at a certain age. We've planned for, the age that you want to retire. But, you and your wife may decide, we're going to retire a little bit earlier. We may decide, we started our own business. I plan on working forever. I don't think I'm going to ever shut it down. I found something I enjoy doing. I love doing it. And I'm going to do it until the Lord called me home. So, we can readjust the retirement plan. We might not be saving to 65. We may be saving until we're 70 because we're going to continue to work. So, in that allows us to make adjustments to our risk profile and become either more aggressive or more conservative along the way. So we're always going to take into account those things that we can't, control, which is, of course, the stock market volatility to a certain extent. But things that we do control is when we take certain steps. So we want to make sure that we control our risk tolerance in correlation to those life events that we know are going to happen. And the reason why we want to do that, and I would tell people on an annual basis, because the life events that we can't account for are always going to be there. So me as an advisor, I know a year's a long time and a lot can happen in a year, good and bad. Yeah. So I need to make sure that I'm having a conversation with you to see what has changed, if anything. Now, great, if ain't nothing changed, then we can just keep rolling right along. But if, my daughter had a child. Okay, well, I want to save for a grandchild now. Or my daughter got married. Well, guess what? I don't have that responsibility. She has a husband that's taking care of her now, so I don't have to give her money anymore. You know what? I got a wedding to plan for, Mr. Hamilton. You know what? Okay, well, the saving we were doing here, we may need to be a little more judicious because we got to pay for a wedding over there. So those life events are going to be there and going to happen. So we want to have that plan, like we said, that we put together to kind of give us a roadmap to be able to account for those things. But then life is going to throw some additional things at us too that we got to be able to handle as well.
All right. That's excellent. So we should at least get that risk assessment done once a year at least, at minimum. And then because that also affects our time horizon as cool. Like you said, you explained so eloquently is different things that happen in our lives. And then so it is also incumbent upon us as the client as well that yes, you are going to check in at least once a year, but if we have something that happens in our lives, it would be incumbent upon us to give you a call and say, hey, Mr. Hamilton, look, like you said, examples of, okay, my daughter is pregnant now. Okay, she's getting married now. And, and these types of things have changed. So now I can make an adjustment to how much risk I can take. Now my time horizon has changed as well. But with those two factors, let's talk about the liquidity aspect, because also that seems to determine what we can and can't do is how much money or liquidity we have. And so if you could kind of explain what liquidity is and how does it affect our investment opportunity?
Well, absolutely. Well, like I said, this is the kind of the third leg to this trilogy, so to speak, that we need to kind of have and make sure we are done in our evaluation process. Of course, the risk assessment we've done, we evaluate the time horizon, and those things have led us to understanding what kind of liquidity we need to have from an investment and a saving standpoint. So we all need to have some liquidity. We all need to have those 3 to 6 months emergency reserves for those life events that we can't account for. That's the flat tire. That's the air conditioning going out. That's the, my kids coming home saying they got a field trip, but they need money for this. I had a son came to me today and said, Dad, we got book fair today. I'm like, can you come to me for book fair? And I want to get the poster and the pens and the pencils and all the books. And I'm saying, Mom may never give you no money for book fair. You better go to the library. But I'm going to be there for book fair today, say the least. So, this is what we have to deal with, what we go through, so we have to have a certain amount of liquidity. But then we look at our evaluations of our investment portfolio and our financial plan, liquidity can keep us from having to liquidate in the event of something happening that, can deter us from reaching our full potential from an investment standpoint. So it can keep us from making certain mistakes. I meet people all the time and they're saying, man, Mr. Hamilton, I put my money in this CD, but, I don't have any money to pay for my child's tuition right now. And if I get my money out of this CD, I'm going to have a penalty. I said, well, did you evaluate your liquidity and have an assessment done before you put your money in this particular investment? They said, well, I didn't think I was going to need it. Well, key word, you didn't think. You always have to plan for the unexpected. Did you put your money in that CD and not make sure you had those 3 to 6 months emergency reserves? Now, because, we're all optimistic in nature when it comes to investing. Yeah. That's why I tell people the goal of an advisor is to plan for the worst and then hope for the best. It's not for you to come here and sit down and me tell you how great the stock market is and how much money you're going to make in all your investments and how wonderful things are going to be. It's not all, gumdrops and rainbows. It don't work that way. I got to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, so you can make sure that, we have, a soft landing spot in any situation. So that's what leads a lot of people to having a misrepresentation and keeping someone from being invested in the wrong types of products. So if you have a short time horizon and we know, like you say, daughter's going to college, or you got to pay for a wedding, or, my son is getting ready to go to college to do X, Y, Z, and I know I'm going to need that money in a short period of time. That money does not need to be put in anything that's going to lock it up and tie it up. I need to have liquidity and have access. Okay. So if I'm talking to the guy at the bank and he's saying, well, Mr. Hamilton, you have this extra $15,000 over here, and I don't think it needs to stay in a savings account because you got your 3 or 6 months reserves. You should go ahead and put that money in a CD or put that money in annuity. I'm like, well, if he's making that recommendation and he hasn't evaluated my situation, and I follow that direction, all of a sudden I go to that man and say, I need to get my money back out because I need to pay for my son to go to college, and that tuition check is due. When all of a sudden I have to take a penalty to get my money out. Now, was the product bad, or was it more so the representation of the product? See, a lot of times we blame the product. Well, the product ain't do nothing to you. The stock market ain't do nothing to you. It was the utilization of that particular product. If I know you're trying to buy that house like we talked about early on, and you got to get ready to pay that down payment, those closing costs, and those things are only getting more expensive as we go because houses are getting more and more costly as we see.
Sure.
And I know I'm saving this money for that particular purpose, and all of a sudden the guy tells you, you know what, you need to put that money in annuity. I think you should park it there. If you leave it there, it's going to be safe. You can get some income from it. I'm like, okay, but now all of a sudden you ready to buy that house, and he comes say in order to liquidate that, it's a 7% penalty. And you can only get out X amount of percent out of this annuity. I'm like, well, I need to buy the house today. I got closing at 2:00. I need my money. And all of a sudden, you go to pull that money out, you take the hit in the penalty, and now you don't even have enough to close. Well, that's improper planning. That was the liquidity aspect of that particular opportunity did not meet your need. It ain't the annuity fault.
Right.
The annuity did nothing to you but get sold. But it was sold by an individual. The individual is the one that did you the disservice. The company that represented this particular product was the one that did not do their due diligence and make sure that, you got the right, opportunity to actually meet your needs, because they sold you something versus actually educating you and making sure you had a plan before you participated in something. And that's what we have to take our own accountability. That's why I tell people when we talked about at the beginning of the year, the difference between working with a broker and working with an actual fiduciary advisor. So the fiduciary and someone like myself, we have to make sure whatever we do is in your best interest. Right. We're legally obligated to ask you, all of the questions, to do that deep dive and make sure this is in your best interest. Whereas their broker, if you come in and say, yeah, I just want to buy this annuity, or I want to buy this CD or buy this particular stock, bond, or mutual fund, they can sell it to you. That's what's called an unsolicited transaction. There's nothing you can do about it because you asked for it. You participated in that sale. So, they're not required to make sure, you know what, Mr. Richardson, I don't know if that's in your best idea. I don't know if that's in your best interest to actually buy this particular CD at this particular point in time, knowing that you have, a child in college, one going to college and another behind her, and knowing you are actively involved in different real estate ventures and things of that nature. I think you're going to need to have some liquidity, so we may need to go a different direction. They're not obligated to have that conversation. And all too often, we make assumptions as a community as to what we think someone is supposed to do for us, and that's not always the case.
That's good. So taking the time, gaining knowledge, but then also implementing that knowledge, right? As we're talking about evaluation, implementation leads to execution. And this is risk assessment, time horizon, and then liquidity. So we want to make sure that we have enough, checking our liquidity up front. Yep. And then as we continue to move forward, making sure that that liquidity that we have in our pockets now and within the investments will actually cover the things that we have planned in our assessment.
Absolutely.
Make sure those things are covered.
Well, and that's one that we tell the people, and they wonder why, we kind of harp on planning so much. And, I like to tell them, say, look, all of these things are what's being done. See, we like to microwave things in our community all too often. We want to walk in the church and be saved tomorrow and then wonder why we still having problems the next day. I said, just because you came to the Lord and you got saved don't mean the problem end. Actually, that's when the problems begin, because now you know you got a problem. Now, once you've committed your life, now it's time for the correction. So in the implementation part, and that leads to the execution of it. So we always like to tell people, so look, when you get the plan, that's not the end. That's just the beginning. When you commit your life to Christ, that's not the end. That's just the beginning. That's when the real work actually starts, because now that's where the discipline has to come into play. That's where you have to be actively involved in the success of your life and your finances. And we can't do it without you. I can put together the best plan in the world, but if you don't stick to that plan, there's no way we're going to see the value that can come out of that plan. Now, does that mean that I'm not a good planner? No, it doesn't. But guess what's going to happen? You're going to look at it like it's my fault that I'm not a good planner because you were not disciplined. The same way we say, well, that company was no good, or, I went to that gym and that gym ain't that great, but how many times did you actually show up at the gym? How many of that time did you actually show up ready to work when you came to the gym? How often were you following that meal prep plan away from the gym? So it ain't the gym fault. We got to stop blaming others for our lack of success, and we got to take some personal accountability in wanting to be the change that we want to see. So, these things that we're covering, although they are directly tied to your success financially, and we have to have a plan first and foremost. But after we've put together that plan, and while we're putting together that plan, All these things are going on inside of it. So when I'm telling my community the value of a good financial advisor is so much more than you can really even comprehend and put into words, because these are all things that have taken place and we ain't invested no money yet. You know, we've evaluated the situation and done analysis. We've designed a plan. We're trying to implement, and we're evaluating as we implement.
Right.
And we're constantly doing an evaluation because things are changing around us at all times. So there's work that's going on, but I can't give you something for nothing. You got to meet me halfway. If I didn't put together the plan and you're not saving the money to go into the plan, there's no way the plan is going to be successful. So I get drawn up to do what it's supposed to do.
Right.
But you got to do your part to make sure what's supposed to be in the plan actually goes in it. And so you can see the results and reap the reward and have the success that we all want to have. So, you know, this is the call to action. You know, the same way we need our people to come to Christ. You know, I need them to come to the financial advisor, go see a financial advisor and utilize and take action, because, you know, we can talk till we blue in the face about, you know, all the different opportunities that are available to you, all the steps that you need to take, but you have to take a step. And I want to see our people take steps in a positive direction in every area of their life. And I firmly believe that if they get their life right with Christ first, everything else will fall into place a little bit easier. Because one thing I've learned is that it's impossible to have a sound financial plan when you got bad habits. And not just bad habits with your money, because usually your bad habits with your money, it comes from the bad habits in your life.
Yeah.
So if you can correct and get Christ-centered and become more Christ-like in your giving, in the way you operate with people, and the way you just respect yourself, that will lead to you having more discipline. Because if I'm willing to give God 10%,
Right.
you're going to be much more willing to give yourself 10% too. You're going to be more disciplined in that because you're building the right habits. So I see it all the time. I've met with a number of people, and I tell people, it ain't about how much money you make. It's about how much money you keep. I've met with athletes and entertainers and people who make millions and millions of dollars. And at the end of the day, they have nothing to show for it because they have bad habits. And I've met people that have never made more than $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in their life, and they are retired with millions of dollars put away in their investment and savings accounts, all because of the habits. And one of the common denominators that I see and the lack thereof is the self-discipline within their life and their relationship with Christ.
That's good, because that's what biblically God has laid out plans for us. As we talked about, God has a plan for you to prosper and be in good health, right? But you won't understand that if you don't get into the word of God, if you don't give your life to Christ, if you don't discipline yourself to follow his plan first and foremost, because his plans for you are better than any plan that you can make for yourself. So that's why as you're imploring our listeners, our people, to get your foundation set in God, trust in Jesus Christ. And then, as a scripture that we shared with you at the very beginning of this show, in Proverbs 21 verse 5 from the New Living Translation, says, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. And too many times we put together bad plans and we put together our own plans, and we don't bring those plans to God and trust in him and lean not to our own understanding.
Yes, sir.
We have an understanding that we want, or we've gone to the water cooler and listened to somebody, or we've talked to this friend and they've given us a plan for our lives, but they didn't create us. They didn't make us. They don't know what we have going on. Or we see somebody else that we deem is successful.
Yes.
Right. But we don't know what's going on inside of their houses. We don't know what's going on inside of their lives. We don't know if they have turmoil or if they have prosperity within their own life, but we are looking at them from the outside.
Yes.
And figuring that, okay, that looks good. I want to be like that. But what we are trying to encourage you today is don't make hasty decisions, because hasty decisions, you end up making mistakes. But yet also don't get paralyzed by doing too much analysis, But what we want you to do is get good knowledge, right? That's what we're coming here to give you. That we're striving to give you good knowledge and faith in God so that you can have better understanding and management of your finances. This is what the truth about Black wealth is. This is how we close the gap, is by getting closer to God through Jesus Christ, and then also having a good sit down with financial advisors to manage what we have, and then also finding a good congregation, a good church home to grab hold to and link into so that you can build your faith up as well. Because Proverbs 19:2 says, enthusiasm without knowledge is no good, and haste is what makes mistakes. And so when we come back after the commercial break, we're going to get back into some of those things and then give some people some more analysis.
Absolutely. Remember, bad habits are expensive. Christ is free. See you in a minute.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Welcome back to Closing the Gap podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am the co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with the host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton, and you are tuned in to WATV V94.9 FM. Also on YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth. You can also find us on any of your podcast streaming platforms. Look us up, Closing the Gap, The Truth. Also, you can find us on Instagram at Closing the Gap, The Truth, Facebook, Closing the Gap Podcast. Find us all there. Like, share, and subscribe. Share it with somebody else. If this knowledge that you are getting and you are listening on the radio, please go to one of our social media pages and give us a comment. You know what I'm saying? Let us know what stuck out to you. Let us know what you're able to utilize in the information that we are striving to share, because we want you to understand that this is a labor of love that we are doing because we care about you. We care about our people. We care about our community. We care about you because God loves us and cares about us. And this is our ministry.
Absolutely.
That Christ has called us to do. And so we feel the need to do it. And that's why we're doing it. And we want you to have all the knowledge and success for your life. As we've stated in previous shows, it doesn't matter whether you come to my barbershop, my church, or whether you come and get your financial planning from Hamilton Wealth Advisors. We want you to. But if you don't, find a good financial planner to make the plans with. Find a good church home to go and join the church and practice your faith in Jesus Christ. Find a good barbershop to get you a good haircut from. We are just promoting excellence within our community, whether you do it with us or not. We just want you to be great because we believe that God has a plan and a purpose for your life. And we want to try to push you and help assist you to reach that goal that God has for you. But we don't want you to be hasty, right? We don't want you to make a rush decision, but yet we don't want you to wait too long either, right? So as we've stated previously, and there's a saying that says the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, and the best time to plant a tree is today. And so today is the day that salvation is before you. Today is the day that good financial planning is before you. So we want you to take the time, put together a plan, and once you get that plan, you need to evaluate it, implement it, and constantly execute it. And then in evaluating that plan, we talked earlier about you need to do a risk assessment. You need to look at your time horizon, and you need to look at your liquidity. The risk assessment is your tolerance for financial risk and how it affects your investment strategies. Your time horizon is a time frame that you have for achieving various financial goals, and your liquidity is how much accessible cash do you have now and to make the investment in your opportunities, but then also how much liquidity will you have when your plans come to fruition. So within that, we've been talking, man, on this show so far, and as we look at those three things, what do those three things lead to when we talk about risk assessment, time horizon, and liquidity? What do those three things lead to?
You know, what it leads to is, proper diversification. And what I've learned in our community, we really don't understand what diversification means. It's a word that's, really overutilized. And everybody says, "Oh, I'm diversified. I diversified my 401k and I diversified my all my investments." And I was like, "Well, how did you diversify?" Which I got an account. I got an account at Wells Fargo. I got an account at Regions, and I got an account over at the credit union. I'm like, well, when you talk to them, what did you do differently inside of those 3 different places? Well, no, I answered all the questions the same. But I told them I need the same thing. Well, how did you really diversify? You just have money spread out of 3 different places. You don't really have any diversification. So I meet with people all the time, and they'll have accounts.
Okay.
But every time you walked into that bank or every time you walked into that different financial organization, you were the same person answering those questions. So because you were answering those questions the same, that person gave you something just like or very similar to what you already had. So how did you actually diversify it? Diversification is not having money at multiple places. You could have all the money at one place. Diversification and true diversification means we're talking about uncorrelated asset classes. We're talking about stocks. We're talking about bonds. We're talking about real estate. We're talking about alternative investments, commodities, private equity. That's diversification in its true sense. Now, from a standard standpoint, we talk about diversification for what the people have the most questions about right now is when I say how diversified is your 401k? And, the most common answer is, oh, I got it all in the S&P 500. I got it all in this one fund. I'm like, well, you're not actually diversified because there's a huge marketplace at our disposal. But if you have all your money in the S&P 500, those are all large cap funds. There's mid cap funds, there's small cap funds, there's international, there's real estate. There's a number of different funds and asset classes within a stock market portfolio and styles. Is it active? Is it passive? Is it tactical? Is it not? There's a lot of different ways to manage investments and a lot of different ways to diversify a portfolio because even within investments, they can be managed differently. Do we have a passive strategy where we're buying and holding? Do I have an active strategy where I'm doing management, where I'm making more changes and evaluations on a continuous basis? Like, what is my overall strategy and goal? Because any strategy can win, but you have to find out what is going to be the winning strategy for you. And just because a strategy was winning for someone else doesn't mean it's going to win for you. And we have this misconception because, we usually take advice. Naturally, we take advice from people that's older than us.
Okay.
And that can be good and bad. I'm big on, of course, you can receive wisdom from somebody older, but you have to be careful because you have to understand where that person is coming from too. So I meet a lot of guys that, they are in their late 60s and they've worked their whole life. They're retired. They've been investing their own money for a long period of time. And they always tell me, this is my strategy and this is how I do it. And I'm like, well, that was built over the course of your lifetime based on your experiences in the market. Your experience in the market is going to be a lot different from a person that's a lot younger than you. It used to be a day and time when you could buy a stock back in the 60s and 70s. So all the stocks are printed out in the newspaper. You get the newspaper, they look at it on a Sunday afternoon. They look and say, man, that Walmart stock look pretty good. You know what? I'm going to see how it moves and how it changes. And they let it go week by week by week. And they said, man, that Walmart stock ain't changed. I think I'm going to go and buy some of that Walmart stock. And they'd buy it. And they'd hold it and they held their stock for 20, 30, 40 years. Now that stock has made them a whole lot of money. And it's been very successful with their strategy. What they didn't understand was they were buying that in the infancy of the financial growth of our stock market. From the standpoint of the number of companies and activity that are now involved in the market. So they were able to buy and hold and have great success in that because of the time. It's not so much they were great investors that they bought it in a time where there were a lot fewer people involved in the market. There wasn't the technology that's involved in and out. Stock prices didn't move and fluctuate the way they do now. So they were able to buy and hold and they were able to stand still and be stagnant. And over a 30-year track record, they were able to make great returns. I said, well, that strategy is, although I'm not going to say it can work today, because anytime you buy and hold over a long period of time, you give a chance, a greater opportunity for success. But it's a lot more activity that goes on in the market nowadays. You can't look at a stock today and wait 2-3 weeks and think it's going to be the same thing when you get there. Because people are buying stocks and buying investments at a record pace right now. People are buying stocks on their cell phone as we speak. People are making changes and buying stocks and bonds inside of their 401ks as we speak. So because of the sheer activity inside of the marketplace and because of the pace in which things are moving, the same strategies that worked yesterday are not always going to be the same strategies that are going to work today. So I'm not saying you can't learn something from these individuals, because the one thing that we need to take from them, and the biggest thing we need to take from them, is the patience, is being able to see something and have the patience to act when we feel compelled to act, and then watching us see it through. So we can take that from the equation.
Okay.
But the process in which we evaluate is a lot different because of the activity that's going to be going on during that period of time. So understanding how to properly diversify our investments keeps us from being in situations where we're hopefully losing too much too soon. So when I see a person and they tell me, Mr. Hamilton, in 2008, when the stock market crashed, I lost 50%. Well, how old were you at that time? I said, man, I was about 60 and I was ready to retire. All right, well, if you were 60 and you lost 40 to 50% of your retirement because of the market crash in '08, well, that tells me right off the bat, you were not properly diversified. You had way too much money in a volatile position. If you're close to retirement, a simple rule of thumb that I can give people right now today is take the rule of 100. If you don't have access to an advisor, just take the rule of 100.
Okay.
Take the number 100 minus your age, and that's the amount of money you should have in a volatile position. So if you're 60 years of age, minus 100, that's 40%. 40% of your money should have been in a volatile position or a stock-based position. 60% should have been in a more conservative position. So in the stock market crash in 2008, there would have been no way they could have lost 50% of their value. They would have only lost 20% of their value if they would have followed that methodology. So just those simple things of understanding and utilizing. If you're not going to come see a financial planner or an advisor, there's things that you can't implement and utilize yourself if you're going to be kind of a do-it-yourselfer. Implement that rule of 100 and just use that to help you diversify and be in a better position. But also, right now, you have to be very careful, because I hear a lot of people talking about how they invested in. And when people talk about investments, it's always all about the sexy stuff. It's all about the glamorous stuff. So right now, everybody wants to talk about stocks. It's all AI and tech. Well, you have to understand, easy come is going to be the first to go. So while those things have been performing great, and not saying you don't need to have those in your portfolio, but understanding how much you can afford to have in your portfolio is the key to creating diversification, because we don't want to be all in tech and miss out on Amazon, Walmart, Target, and all these other places. Now, I don't know if we still boycotting Target stock or we just boycotting Target the store. We're going to have to make up our mind what we're going to do here. So, because these things are going to affect our listeners because they're invested in these opportunities. So, understanding how you want to invest and understanding for those individuals that do want to be socially conscious, there are socially conscious investment funds. If you tell me, hey, Mr. Hamilton, I don't want to be invested in anything that promotes gun violence or war. I don't want to be invested in any companies that own, that are alcoholic companies or sell alcohol or have anything to do with wars or anything like that. We can build a portfolio that is socially conscious, and those things can be removed. So you can be as detailed as you want. And that is the goal of really being diversified, is being able to have, multiple layers and styles and sectors of the market inside a portfolio. Because the number one driver of consistent financial success in a portfolio is the right kind of asset allocation. That changes all the time. So much like we talked about earlier, how often should we be doing that risk assessment? That diversification assessment should be done on an ongoing basis. Where does the money need to be? We have to be able to look at things. If we know that right now, the world has honestly been in shambles for a long period of time, and as chaotic as, our market is right now today, the U.S. stock market and U.S.-based stocks have been the strongest, best performers over the last decade plus. Why would you own international stock right now? Not saying that it won't come back and it won't turn around, but understanding where the money is being made and learning how to properly diversify into those areas gives you consistency. Because for me, I tell people, success is consistently doing the right things over a long period of time. It's not about swinging to hit a home run and hit a grand slam. So I'm not going up to the plate trying to swing for the fences every time. I just want to get on base. I want to keep, scoring runs. Is it better to hit one home run and strike out 4 times a game, or is it better to hit 4 doubles and score 3 times in a game? We have to ask ourselves these questions. What kind of success do we want to have? Do we want a success that looks good for Instagram? Or do we want a success that they know your name when you go to the bank?
That's good. That's good. And I would add to that as well, because I do like going to the bank. Somebody knows my name.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm saying? But also going to the ultimate banker, and he knows my name.
Absolutely.
And that's God. And knowing that when I pray that God can lead me and guide me to make the right decision and to find the right financial plan, and to find the right financial planner, and to be able to get done the things that I need to get done for my life and lead and guide me in those things. So I appreciate that breakdown from you in that regard. So you talked about people trying to do it themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, I've seen that as well, not only in finances, but, I know some people cut their own hair, right? And then when they have something special to go to, they come to the barbershop and they get a professional haircut for that time, right? And then also, even in faith, you have some people that they don't go to church. They feel that they can, do everything on their own at home, and there's nothing wrong with, you definitely need to have an understanding of God and Christ and the word on your own, but there's nothing like community and coming to somebody. So when it comes to financial planning, I think it's important, and you can touch on this, for people to understand what happens when you try to do it yourself. Like there are studies and understanding of what happens to people's finances when they are actually talking to a professional versus actually doing it themselves.
Absolutely.
What?
You know what?
No.
Well, in saying that, one thing that comes to mind, when I hear you say that, is the word access is what comes to mind first and foremost. And, going to church is different from, listening to the word at home on your TV, because when you walk in those church doors and you feel the Spirit in the atmosphere, you can feel Jesus walking up and down the aisles. You can feel God's presence all around you. So the word access, I feel like I got direct access to the Lord when I'm inside those 4 walls and I'm in the church body and that word is being delivered. I know I can feel God's presence in the atmosphere. I don't think, I don't think you can feel God's presence at home. Because I've Sundays, okay, well, I couldn't make the church, well, I pull up and I've watched a service, and it's not the same. You can tell yourself it's the same, and you may receive the message the same, but the feeling that you get from being connected, like I say, with 2 or more joined together,
He'd be in the midst. So
he in the midst.
because we are a communal people,
Exactly.
right? So yes, you can feel at home, but there's a different feeling,
Yes.
right, when you're in the place.
Yes.
As you can tell, even going to football games, basketball games, right? I know last major football game I went to was last year, big game. I went to the Alabama-Texas game, and the energy that was in that place.
Yes.
When I got home, it literally took me over an hour or 2.
Joanna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't even doing a whole lot of the rah-rah and the cheering, but the energy in the place, right? Because I'm a living being. And so the energy in that place, I then took it home.
Yes.
So that's what I would say. Rather than saying that you can't do it at home, you need to charge up.
Yes.
Right. No different than coming to a financial advisor. When you come and you sit down with the financial advisor and you discuss all of these various things about your financial plan, the risk assessment, the time horizon, the liquidity, and then diversifying, you pick up the knowledge and the energy from the financial advisor, and then you go home and you're more comfortable. And that's why, as you said, you need to come back and see your financial advisor at least once a year. You need to, you know what I'm saying, give a call. You need to check in on that plan and review that plan every so often, right?
Yes.
And stay in touch with it so that you have that comfort when you're at home. And that's what we want you all to know and to do, is that get the knowledge so that you can be at ease at home, so that you can have that comfort at home, so that you can be at peace at home when you're away from each other and away from your financial advisor, and you understand what you have in place.
See you next time.